Choonwha Moon was born in Seoul, South Korea. She earned her BA and MFA from the University of Florida and is a member of the Gulf Coast Poet Society. She has been published in Houston Poetry Fest 2014 and won the Laureen Pouncey Memorial Award in 2015. She's also published in Austin International Poetry Fest 2015 and the Dos Gatos Texas Poetry Calendar 2016. She has been a featured poet for First Friday's in-print reading series, Friendswood Library's Off the Page Poetry Series, thank you again, Public Poetry and Speak Poet. She was interviewed by NPR Houston Matters for its Poetry Month series, and she was the featured poet for the 2016 Houston Poetry Fest. She lives in Houston, Texas. Please join me in welcoming Choonwha Moon.
I forgot to ask how long I was supposed to be reading.
15, 20, something like that. How's that?
All right. Well,
Too long?
no. All right. So something before I start reading is if you could avoid clapping. That is just my preference because it makes me very jittery. And then I feel really insecure when it's a soft clap versus a loud clap. And so it's like a pastor counting to see what the tithe was like for that week, whether it was a good sermon or not. So yeah. I'll start off with an Asian poem, and it's called Saving Asian Faces. And I feel like as I'm reading, I know a lot of poets may disagree with explaining or giving background to the poems, but I figure I enjoy it personally because it's different than just reading the book. So I'm going to give you a background of this poem. I have a friend of mine who wanted to get a facelift in Korea because they're very cheap and very popular. But her only concern was that her daughter looked exactly like her. And so she was really debating whether to do this face stuff. It's called Saving Asian Faces. In Korea, perfecting Asian faces is as cheap as buying a noodle bowl off a street vendor. Surgeon signs entice entire streets, a celebration of narrow noses, creased eyelids, and gentle chins. Lunch hour special. Leave with a new face, and maybe what consumes you will still be warm on your work desk when you return. All ugly Asians change their ugliness, which leaves only ugly Asian children, impatiently waiting their turns to template a new ancestry of shocked eyes, shaved bones, and bleached skin. Asians are saving face. Outside honor springs forward, inside so sorry falls back. It means ugly Asians scamper in afternoon alleyways, and when only smallness can move in their mouths, their bandages politely molt off so as not to offend anyone anymore. My daughter was complaining that my award-winning poem about my son, that I did not have a poem for her, so this one is dedicated to my daughter. And it's called Lapwing, which is the name of a little bird, and it's actually like the common name would be little fan bird, right? So it's Lapwing, little fan bird. A lapwing mother will lay her eggs in shallow depressions, and when her young are in danger, the mother will dance a broken-winged act, distracting predators with easy prey. She will flop and drag her body in exaggeration, moving danger some distance away from her babies, then suddenly fly away. Daughter, I have played my part to the Linnaean god, mournful, so well that I sometimes forget evil has grown bored of my fake fan dance. My own predators are dark reeds along black mirrors, and the what-ifs and my unborn sadness stay inside me, warm and unbroken and mostly untrue. I fan in backward bent, flapping myself against the imaginary until and again, each morning you wake, your light glistens on clear water, catching my eye, and I fly closer to you, to the beauty that distracts me. I'll read about anger, because I'm not all about sadness and depression. Anger. If anger lives in sadness's backyard, sorry, I lied. If anger lives in sadness's backyard, then I am last year's bones, buried hurriedly by the dog of obedience. She has hidden me in half-covered clippings in damp earth, and whenever she is disciplined and salivating bitterness, she digs my ankle bone up again to ruminate and chew. I am undiminishing in her delight and forgetfulness. I lie scattered in shallow graves throughout sadness's backyard and am planted next to weeds of regret and forget-me-nots. One day, when the white clouds are highly cumulus with instability and weariness, I will resurrect myself, whistle my knuckles and my scattered-bodied self somewhat whole again, and drag my brittle bones through the back door, past the kitchen, down the hall, and damn it, without knocking, push through the front door and out into the wide front streets made of flesh and forgiveness. I'll write about gardening, even though I don't garden. I have several gardening poems. I write about gardening apparently when I don't know what else to write about. So this one is called Starting Over. Like a gardener who burns off an asparagus bed to make ready for next year's crop, a poet might want to burn off last year's printed stalks, lying thick over last year's time patch, and make grief a cheery blaze that warms the dips in the bed and leaves a black film on the surface to absorb heat on subsequent days. For a gardener, the fire kills asparagus beetles, overwintering their eggs. For a poet, the fire kills sentimental weeds rooting in wait. Burning also discourages them from making their nests. Another benefit of fire, displacing deer, or a far worse scourge, melancholy. And since I have one for my son and for my daughter, I'll read to you the one I wrote for my husband. And it's called My Names. I'm adopted, so I have multiple names. And Choonwha is not really my real name, but it's my pen name. And so sometimes I get confused because of my multiple names and apparently multiple personalities. My names. The moon is very moony, my husband whispers to the window. His attempt at poetics is like the names I have been given, like the moon that is my birth name in old language, but means door in another. His moony means full. My moon means large gate, the double kind that keeps hurt in and hurt out. My family nickname for me means spring flower. My given name means eternal love, which sounds like clever when I say it too loud. Marriage changed my name to seaweed, not the kind that is beached after a large storm, but the dark kelp kind. Like when someone calls my name, I turn, unsure, the way there is a name for you, dear husband, in another language that calls you myself. And I forgot to tell you that in Korean there is an endearment that translates to honey, but literally means myself. One more. Since my friends are here, and I so rarely invite anybody that I know outside of the poetry circle, I'll read to you one of my favorites. Unfortunately, it's a suicide poem, but but it is my favorite because it is about my birth mother. And it is a concrete poem, and a concrete poem for you, non-poets, is a shape poem. So when you see it in print, it has a shape, and the shape is a tree. And it's called A Topography of the Suicide for my mother. Maybe you didn't know that spring leaves should have anything to do with it, that the inner landscape of your smile could have indirectly stipulated which budding tree might have been strongest to hold such a small body, that the prairie of hope grew in fields of unabandoned yellow-green, like the smooth, silvery branches that tiptoed their fingertips upward. You might not have known that spring light, like soft imprints of eye contact, your eye contact, glides down this sweet-filled body, the trunk of satisfaction, and that perhaps later and every day, this photosynthesis of you might be rooted dormant in your daughter. Thank you.